Welcome to the Stop Down Photography Podcast, Episode 11. I'm your host, Scott Davenport, and today's topic is truth and photography. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Apologies for my voice. I'm battling a bit of a cold, so if my voice sounds a little bit scratchy or craggly today, well, you know what's going on. Well, today's topic is truth. Truth is defined as, quote, that which is fact or in accordance with fact or reality. And that definition certainly doesn't describe my photography, and I don't know if the word truth describes any photo, really. When I hear photographers talk about truth in photography, it's usually in the vein of, well, that's not really what the place looked like. That photo isn't true to life. No person looks like that. I don't remember seeing those colors. Truth, quote unquote, in a photo, it's kind of that comparison to a perception of the world. Now, please permit me a small divergence, but I promise this is connected to photography. Back in the year 2000, I watched a movie called Joint Security Area, JSA. It was made in South Korea, and it's about the Korean border, between North and South Korea. And the movie begins with a close-up of a single photograph, and the camera pans around the photo, and it shows North Korean soldiers, South Korean soldiers, the DMZ. They're each on their respective sides of the line. There's some men that are manning their posts. Some are standing guard. One is approaching the camera, holding up his hand as if to block the photographer. Others crisply march through the background. The film has barely begun. No words have been spoken. Yet already, my mind has crafted a story based on what I know, or what I think I know, about these soldiers in the photo. I built up a truth based on what I saw in the photograph, combined with what I think I know about the world, my perceptions of the world. Now, 2 hours later, and after lots of drama, the film ends the same way it began. The camera panning around that same photograph, but the story is entirely different. I know the characters in the photo. I know their stories. I know how they've interacted. I know the events leading up to the moment that photograph's taken. The photo evokes an entirely different set of emotions. The photo didn't change at all, but the photo now had a very different truth. So in this case, knowing the story behind the photo was a clear influence on the truth of that photo. And that got me thinking, what other things influence the quote-unquote truth of a photo? First up, what choices does the photographer make when capturing the photo? Definitely an influence. The sheer act of framing up a photo is the beginning. What gets included in the frame? What's cast aside? Would the elements that were left out of the frame, if we knew what they were, affect our opinion of the truth of the photo? What about when I put a filter on my lens? I throw a filter on the front of my lens and I'm distorting the truth, right? I'm making things take longer than they do, blurring certain elements. That's not how my eye perceived it. You walk up to that same place without the filter, it looks different. That's distorting the truth, right? Lens choice factors in. I photograph landscapes often and I love my wide-angle lens. Well, what does a wide-angle lens do? It exaggerates elements that are closer to the lens, making them look larger than life. A long lens does the opposite. It compresses a scene. You have a series of, say, city blocks with pedestrians walking up and down the sidewalks at a comfortable distance from one another. But when you put a long lens on there and compress that scene, it makes it look like the entire place is really, really crowded and everyone's on top of one another. That may be the vision for the photo, but is that the truth of the situation? The camera settings affect the truth of a photo. The aperture choice we use, the focus point, the shutter speeds. We can choose to put certain things in focus or out of focus. We can freeze motion and capture things that the human eye doesn't see. Conversely, we can drag the shutter really, really long and get motions and patterns that also our eyes don't normally see. There's the post-processing side of a photo. That's an area that's rife with arguments about truth. Creative choices get made in post-processing, and this is nothing new, right? We've done processing for a long time in photography, not just the digital age. Dodging and burning in the darkroom, chemical choices to skew different colors, the type of paper affects how a print would look and the story and the mood. I mean, heck, you could argue early photography was black and white, and well, we see the world in color. Is that truthful? In the digital age, this just goes on, overload. We have infinite control over color, tone, detail, and I think it's a wonderful thing. At least as my genre of landscapes and fine art, I'm trying to evoke a certain feeling or emotion, which may or may not represent the reality of the world, the truth of the scene that was in front of the camera. As I talk through these things, you might be thinking about photojournalism. Well, isn't that a capture of the truth? A photojournalist is a documentarian by nature. What the camera sees is what gets captured. And I think that's largely true. Certainly in the post-processing arena, the good photojournalists will not be punishing pixels like us landscape photographers. However, adding a bit of contrast or saturation isn't unusual. If you're shooting in JPEG, well, the camera is doing some of that for you. There is a level of processing, and still all the other things apply. What did the photojournalist decide to keep in the frame, eliminate from the frame? Lens choice, focus point, all those things. So there is some amount of a photographer's influence and decision on the truth of a photo. So maybe there is a truth in a photo, not just truth in a pure sense. The truth the photographer wants to convey, and a truth the viewer is able to perceive. And truth depends on what your point of reference is, and quite often, that's a very personal thing. Talking through these points about truth and photography reminds me of a fun experiment. This is something that often comes to light on workshops where you have a group of, let's say, 10 photographers, and you're going to the same location on the same day at the same time. You all have the same weather conditions, and it's maybe it's an iconic shot, or maybe it's just a space where there's limited area to work. So you have these 10 photographers all lined up next to one another, more or less. And the assignment is, well, you're taking a photo of what you see before you. After lens choice, framing, post-processing, I guarantee you will see 10 different photographs. And is one more true than the other? Yeah, I think it comes to what was that photographer wanting to convey with their image, that fine art point of view. So if you haven't done that experiment, grab a photo buddy or a handful of them and go out and try this out. I think you'll find it to be interesting and fun at the same time. You get to get out, you get to go make some photos. While working on the notes for this podcast, it reminded me of a story that was making the rounds about 8 to 10 years ago, I think, where famous historical photos had been shown to be manipulated. The very famous one is a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, which is actually a composite. This is Abraham Lincoln's head put on the body of Southern politician John Calhoun. I'll put a link to the article in the show notes. There are some other photos from the World War II era where either enemies or otherwise no longer favored individuals were actually removed from group photos. This was more of an egregious erasure of individuals from history. It's quite interesting to see all this. These changes were made to promote a certain truth, and it's a reminder that photo manipulation is nothing new. So where do you land on the line between truth and art? What is the line you won't cross when it comes to whether it be cutting something out of a photo, retouching it away, changing color? If you're purely in the fine art camp and you're treating your art more like, say, a painting where you're deciding what to keep on the digital canvas, or are you much more toward the documentarian point of view. You can leave comments on stopdownpodcast.com. When you're leaving comments, you may get a pop-up asking you for user information. You don't have to create an account or anything like that, but you do have to provide some sort of information, like your first name or even just your initials, so that there's something to associate the comment with. So if you get that pop-up, just put in a name and then you can comment as a guest. A big thank you to the supporters on Patreon and our newest member, Jerry. I cannot thank you enough for your support. It is what makes this podcast possible, and it's helping thousands of other photographers grow and enjoy our craft. If you're interested in learning more about the Patreon community, check the show notes. There's also a button on every page of stopdownpodcast.com where you can learn more about it. And that will wrap up this week's episode. I do hope you send in your thoughts about truth and photography and where you are on that spectrum. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, please tell a friend. You can rate and review it in Apple Podcasts or whatever podcatcher you're listening in. That would be very much appreciated. And until next time, my name is Scott Davenport. Have fun.